You had me at hello. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine and feminine energies film breakdown series with one of my favorite romantic films, Jerry Maguire. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine energies, I talk about this in most of my videos, but a brief summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies. We all have a core energy that's the one that we're most ourselves in. We can be wounded or healed versions of either of these energies. These energies often link up with our gender. They don't have to, but they very often do. Each of these energies contains archetypes, and we can tap into any of the archetypes within us whenever we need to. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need to have one partner to be in the masculine and one partner to be in the feminine, because opposite energies attract sexually and same energies repel sexually. So let's get into Jerry Maguire. This movie was kind of like the romantic film when I was sort of coming of age. It came out in 1996. I saw this movie in the theater and I also watched it dozens of times. I think I had this on VHS, which I just aged myself massively. But to be honest, rewatching this film for this breakdown made me look at it in a completely different light. So this movie is focused around Jerry Maguire, played by Tom Cruise, and he is a sports agent. Now, at the beginning of the film, Jerry is operating from, I would say, a very wounded masculine energy, in that he has completely disconnected from his heart. He's in his masculine energy as a sports agent. He is a leader. He is always guiding and advising the people who he represents. In this case, it happens to be athletes. So he's really a leader, but you really get the impression that not just him, but he really does believe that the whole industry in general of being a sports agent has become very disconnected from the humanity of things, which very often happens when you have a wounding in the masculine energy. So the masculine becomes so focused on its passion, its purpose, its success. In this particular case, also on very superficial things like money, success, power, and actually takes out the humanity in the people that it is either representing, leading, the people that their actions are affecting, and doesn't actually look at compassion, empathy, things like that, which are feminine energy. So when you have masculine drive, masculine leadership, masculine passion and purpose, and you don't have any of that heart, love, empathy, compassion, relationships, connection, things like that, it becomes very cold and it can become very cruel. And it's really important, especially in our world today, that having things like money, success, power, those things, they're not inherently bad. It's the question of what are you willing to do to get them? And are you willing to still have heart, compassion, empathy for the people that are affected by your money, success, and power and things like that? Like, for example, if you create a product or something or a service or things like that, and you create this big company and you get all this money and success because you've created something that is actually helping people, and you have employees who are working for you, and you're creating jobs and businesses, and you're treating the people who work for you with humanity, and you're concerned with their health and safety because you know if you are concerned with that they're going to be more productive and you're going to grow. That is all healthy masculine leadership. If you say create a product or service or something that is actually destructive to people, and you're treating your employees as if they are not human, and you are only about money and power, and you are willing to cut corners at every turn just to save a buck, and you don't actually care about the people or the way that what you're doing is affecting the people around you, that kind of thing, that would be more wounded masculine, because you're going for this goal, but you've completely shut down your heart and your compassion. You don't actually care about the people that you're hurting. And it's not to say that if you are leading with masculine direction that people might not get hurt, but people getting hurt in a healthy masculine leadership is out of protection. It may be out of necessity, but it is never with an intent to hurt someone. Whereas when you're talking about unhealthy, wounded, toxic, whatever you want to call it, masculine leadership, it really is that they don't really care who they hurt, or they may actually get a thrill out of hurting people simply to make themselves more powerful, more successful, feel better about themselves, something like that. So in this particular case, when we're talking about Jerry Maguire, he doesn't want to hurt people. He just isn't paying attention to his decisions, his actions, the way he's guiding people, and how it's actually affecting their health and their bodies. In this particular case, because he is a sports agent. And it's actually in a moment where he's talking to one of the men he represents, who is an athlete who has had like, a dozen concussions, and this guy's basically, I gotta play because I gotta get the bonus and things like that. And this man's son basically approaches Jerry and expresses his concern. He's afraid for his father's health and well-being. And Jerry kind of fluffs it off, you know, kind of like gives the charm, gives the Tom Cruise charm kind of thing. And the kid basically, you know, tells him off. And Jerry has like a moment. It just takes something to wake up a wounded masculine in order for him to start reevaluating himself. And very often that wake-up call is going to come from very often feminine energy, which will often come from women or children very often. In this case, it's not that the boy is like effeminate, but children tend to embody more feminine energy than young boys because they haven't fully stepped into their masculinity. Now this boy is obviously, he's not little, and he's obviously very practical, reasonable, but he is acting out of emotions. They're totally understandable emotions, but they're acting from emotions. They're from his heart, they're from his love and his compassion, his concern for his father. So those are all his feminine emotions that are coming up, and some of his masculine because he wants to protect his family. But it's that emotion that comes up through him that actually wakes up Jerry out of his wounded masculine, and he has a big breakthrough. It's really a dark night of the soul, really. I mean, he's having this moment, and like he says, it's like he hated himself, and it's like, no, he hated his place in the world. Usually it takes for many of us to hit that point in order for change to happen. It's that low point. It's that wake-up call to what I'm doing hasn't been working, or what I'm doing doesn't align with who I truly am, with my soul. So Jerry's been acting from ego very much. It's all been about his ego success, his ego wins, things like that. He hasn't been operating from his soul. It's a classic ego death, really. It's like he's just like realized that everything in his life has gone awry, and now is the time he wants to get it back together. And so he sits down and writes a mission statement. And it's very interesting how he's always very clear about it's a mission statement, and I think that that's a really significant aspect of this, because the masculine will typically find himself when he finds his mission, which is another word for his passion and purpose. Like his mission, his drive, his goal, his reason for living. And that's usually what the masculine needs to find in order to step into the fullness of his masculine energy. So the significance of the fact that other people call it a memo, or other people call it like a manuscript, or other people call it other things, he's very clear on it's a mission statement because it's his mission. He is laying out his mission. Very much in this mission statement, he is basically saying essentially that he wants to bring heart, compassion, empathy into this business. He wants to take this masculine direction, this masculine leadership, and actually start caring about the people. Taking it away from just being this masculine drive and direction and leadership into having love and compassion and empathy for the people. It's really about blending the masculine and the feminine together in a business, which masculine and feminine in a business setting can actually be amazing. When you have that leadership and direction, and then you have that heart open, caring, and compassion, that is a recipe for success. Now, of course, he's still a little wobbly, right? And I think most of us are when we go through that big, you know, ego death, the dark night of the soul, all this stuff like that. We can have that moment and still be a little shaky about it. And I actually really love, it's a subtle scene, but he actually takes this and he makes a comment that like even the cover looked like The Catcher in the Rye, like he had it all printed up. The copy guy, who's kind of like, you know, like kind of like a hippie kind of guy, is just like, you know, like, this is how you do it. Like, you put your balls out there, man. Like, this is how you become great. And like that is like, he's already inspiring people. Like, he hasn't even sent this out yet, and just the person in the copy place is seeing him and seeing like, hey, this inspires people. That's how you get to greatness. It's not just about being masculine and having the success. It's not just about the money and the power. And again, those things are all great to have. I mean, they're sexy when a man has them, like, don't get me wrong. But if you have all those things and you don't have empathy, compassion, like you don't have any of that natural innate feminine energy that you can tap into so that you can actually care about people, that you can actually care about relationships and community and connection, and you don't have any of that, you're just going to become cold. You're going to become heartless. I mean, that's really where the term narcissist comes from. And it becomes a big theme in this whole film of, they mention it in Jerry's bachelor party, where they talk about being great at friendship, bad at intimacy. it's because Jerry's heart is shut down. Like, his heart is closed, so he's great at being the friend, at being like the hey, I'm a great guy, putting on the smile. He can't actually open his heart and connect to someone on a heart level because his heart is shut down. And even going through this dark night of the soul where he's written about wanting to open his heart and stuff, it hasn't actually happened yet. Like, it's where he wants to go, and he now knows his mission, he knows his purpose. He hasn't quite gotten there yet. Really what this film is a journey from him going from a closed heart into actually learning to open his heart. I mean, that's really the overarching theme of this movie, is really just this guy who did not know how to open his heart, was totally shut down, and actually learning to open it throughout the film. Now, Jerry's first relationship is with Avery, played by the late great Kelly Preston, and Avery is not a huge part of this movie, but she is very significant in their interactions, or even when we hear about their interactions. Avery is the quintessential wounded masculine woman. She even admits it, to be totally honest with you. She is so in her masculine energy, and not from a healthy, grounded place. Like, she's the shark. Like, she's the shark. She's the female shark that's like, I'm gonna destroy everything in my path. I'm gonna tear people down. And, you know, she has no compassion and empathy. And it's interesting how they even have a scene, like, the first time you meet her and they have this, like, wild sex scene. You even kind of get the impression that he's not really enjoying himself that much. Because in reality, he's in his masculine and she's in her masculine. He's wanting to open up his heart, but she's totally content with not opening up her heart and being in that masculine energy. They're repelling. And so even though they're having a sexual moment in this movie, they're kind of totally disconnected. I mean, like, he's really not that into it. She's very performative in the way that she's acting. It's uncomfortable, really. I mean, even I think even the dog watching them is kind of like uncomfortable watching it. But it's interesting, you hear Jerry telling a story on the plane about how he proposed to Avery, and even in the story, like, you haven't even met Avery yet, and he's telling this story and you already know everything about her. He's basically saying that he was going to, you know, they were hiking, I think it was, or rock climbing, or they were doing something adventurous, and he stumbles and she basically just like makes fun of him. She's like, get up, loser, or something like that, or whatever. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do it now. But he's like, but she knows. And he's trying to play it off like it's this funny story, when I think in reality, he's realizing that, okay, this woman, like, she has no compassion. Like, she has no empathy, and she's actually emasculating him. She's demeaning him. Like, she's cruel to him. He kind of decides not to propose at that moment because he's just like, the moment's not right. When in reality, it's because he doesn't want to marry her because she's not very nice to him. She's actually really awful. And then it becomes this whole thing where his assistant thinks that he's already proposed. So they've planned this big event. So they come back to this big moment of thinking that they're engaged, so he gets down on one knee and proposes to her, not because he wants to, but because he feels that pressure. His ego is bruised, right? And he talks about doing this grandiose moment of, like, you know, this goddess of rock climbing, and I'm this klutz, and he's playing it off as humor, but you can kind of tell in reality, like, it's killing him. Like, this is actually killing him. However, he stays in this relationship because he doesn't have to open his heart with her. He doesn't have to connect with her in intimacy because she's shut down. So if she shut down her heart, then he doesn't have to open up his heart at all. So it's a safe relationship. It's not necessarily making either of them happy. It's a safe space because neither one of them is comfortable with emotions and intimacy. So neither one of them is expecting the other to be comfortable with that. And it's interesting in their breakup scene where Jerry has hit a low point. Like, he's really feeling like he's hitting rock bottom. And Avery's basically she's cruel. She's like, you know, you're just thinking about you, and what about how you screwed up both of our lives? And like, she's not giving him any, like, she's such a typical, like, female narcissist. Like, she reminds me of Rachel McAdams' character in Midnight in Paris, which I did a breakdown of. It's such a female narcissist. It's just like, oh yeah, you're miserable, but what about me? Like, that kind of thing. Like, she's got no compassion. She admits it too. She admits that part of her that makes her, you know, cry at old movies, or, you know, gush over babies or things like that. Like, she doesn't have that in her. That's feminine energy, is having that emotion, being able to move through that emotion, having empathy, and being able to connect with somebody and things like that. That's all feminine energy. And she's admitting, like, hey, I don't have that. Like, I'm just not that. And she also, The masculine will always value truth. Avery is always talking about brutal truth. A wounded masculine wants it to be brutal truth. The masculine will value truth. So she's clearly in her masculine energy and it's wounded because she really wants it to be brutal. Like, she's got no, again, empathy for the fact that this man might need some kind of nurturing because he's hit a low point. And it's different than the feminine waking up the masculine. There are ways that the feminine can wake up the masculine that may appear cruel, or his ego might think that it's cruel, but in this particular case, she's just being cruel. Like, there's no empathy. And in fact, when he actually breaks up with her, her ego is bruised, so she pretends, like she fakes being like sad about it and then like decks him, which is very wounded masculine. And oh, I personally hate when women do that, because like I cry so easily, and the number of times that men think I'm fake crying because women like that fake cry to get what they want drives me crazy. Because then when women actually like genuinely cry, men are like, oh, she's just faking it like that other girl was faking it. And it's just like, I'm just gonna say it right now, ladies, stop fake crying, because when you fake cry, you make women expressing their genuine tears and emotions unsafe to do so, because men don't trust women at that point. So if you're a woman out there who fake cries, seriously, stop it, because we only want genuine emotions flowing through us. That's when we're truly in our feminine. And if men start to believe that women just fake cry, which a lot of men do believe, it creates an environment that is unsafe for any woman to express and show her emotions. And in reality, the feminine needs to be able to express her emotions. So that's just a little side note. I really bugs me when women like fake cry to get what they want. I real cry, and there's a lot of women out there who I know real cry. We get shut down a lot because people think that we're fake crying, and personally, that bugs me. But anyway, so Jerry ends up getting fired from his agency that he works with and decides to start his own agency. And Dorothy, who's his main love interest, agrees to go with him. I'm gonna get to their relationship in a minute. But he tries to get as many of his clients to stay with him as possible. And the only client that he can actually keep with him is Rod, played by Cuba Gooding Jr. Now, Rod and his wife Marcy have a really interesting dynamic going, in that when we first meet Marcy, played by Regina King, who is amazing in this movie, she is very much in her masculine energy. I wouldn't necessarily say that it is wounded masculine per se, in that she's not really out to hurt people. She's just very determined. She has direction, she has passion and purpose, she has her priorities straight. Like, she even says to Jerry, she's like, I majored in marketing and so did my husband, like we came to play. Like, she is the one who is in charge of her husband's career. She's the one who talks to the agents for her husband. She's the one who takes the leadership and direction in the very beginning, and she does keep that direction. Like, she has a lot of masculine energy within her that is actually very healthy. It does get a little cruel sometimes, because the problem when you have a woman who is in her masculine energy but she also is a feminine being, when you mix that masculine energy with feminine emotion, it can get cruel sometimes. Marcy dances that line sometimes in this movie. As she puts it at one point, I'm sorry, I'm just a little pregnant right now, because her hormones are flowing. So she's like got this masculine energy, this masculine drive and direction, and she also has her feminine emotions and stuff like that. So Marcy is a very complex character. So she embodies a lot of masculine energy, but she also has a lot of feminine energy, and she really does go through like an arc in this movie of going from having that masculine drive and direction, and there's like a shift that happens in their relationship where Rod actually gets his first offer from the team he plays for, Arizona, and it's a really lowball offer. And Rod is feeling totally defeated. He's feeling like he just doesn't know where to go, and he's basically turning to Jerry for direction. Marcy basically stops and starts giving Rod direction, and Rod's like kind of like, I'm talking to my agent, like I'm gonna take care of this. Rod stands up to her and is like, I'm talking to my agent, please. And she has this scene where she literally shifts. Like, she shifts from this masculine, no, this is what you're gonna do, you know, you're gonna reject this contract, you're gonna play this out, you're gonna be a free agent. She's got the direction, but she switches in that, and she switches over to a very nurturing energy. She switches from that masculine energy to then going into her queen energy of uplifting her king. Is she starts telling him that, you know, we determine our worth, you know, and she starts telling him all these amazing qualities about himself and uplifting him. Is he's down and out. She knows that he's down and out. She knows how miserable he is. She gives him direction because she's not really that trusting in his direction or in his agent's direction. But then she shifts and she brings it into that warm, nurturing support. She switches from that masculine leadership to the feminine leadership of inspiration, and it switches right in that scene. It's in the moment that she switches to that feminine inspiration. That's the moment he opens up to her and realizes, like, yes, I can do it, and tells her how amazing she is because she's now uplifted him and given him the strength and courage to do what he needs to do to own his worth and actually to fight a new day, to actually face the world. And it's that shift, right? She shifts from masculine to feminine just in that one conversation, and you notice that the masculine direction has him a bit shut down, but when she switches into that feminine leadership of inspiration, that's when he opens up, and that's when he feels like he's at his strongest. It's like she goes from being the leader to then stepping into her queen and giving him space to step into his king. Ironically, she's Regina King, but she lets him step into the king energy. And then Marcy fully steps into her feminine energy when they think that Rod has gotten injured. She's watching at home because she has a new baby and with her whole family, and they think that Rod is injured on the field, and she's on the phone with Jerry, and that scene that she has where she's talking to Jerry, begging him to bring her husband home to her, and she says, like, you know, my whole life is this family, Jerry, and it does not work without him. It's that moment of acknowledging that she really does put family first. Family is her top priority, which is very feminine, and acknowledging that he is her partner. He is her partner, he is her king, she is the queen, and she needs him with her. And she releases emotion, she cries. You know, she's been in this very like masculine, tough emotion throughout this movie, but it's that moment of that fear that she might lose the love of her life that she realizes how important family is, and she really sinks into her feminine, and she trusts Jerry at that point a lot more. Whereas before, Jerry was unstable, Rod was somewhat unstable, and you know, they were kind of not totally aligning with their passion and purpose. They were not quite embodied in their masculine energy. So she was really tough in her masculine energy. And then at the end, she starts to really trust in their direction and their leadership. So she can now relax and let her emotions flow and actually admit that it is actually love and connection and her relationships that are really important to her. It's not all about the money, the power, success, which, you know, she always cared about family and love, and she always loved her husband, but it's that moment of realizing that, like, none of this matters unless she has love in her life. The feminine will always prioritize love over everything else. It's that moment that Marcy has that shift, and she really does go through this arc throughout the film of being very much in her masculine and then shifting all the way into her feminine energy. She's clearly a character that can embody both energies, but you really get the sense that she really is her true self when she is in her feminine. She's got a great connection to her masculine, but she really is more successful and she's more herself when she taps into that feminine energy. And she can do that once she actually has trustable masculine leadership in order to allow her to relax to do that. Now, Rod is an interesting character because, like his wife, which is probably why they're very well suited, he has a lot of masculine energy and a lot of feminine energy, but he hasn't really figured out how to make them both work for him. So he has a lot of drive and direction, like he knows what he wants, but it's all masculine direction when it comes to his career. And Jerry calls him out on it at one point. It's like, in your personal life, he's all heart. When it comes to his family, his love, he has so much love, compassion. He has such an open heart. He's so fun and playful and loves life when he's in his personal life. But when it's his career, he is all about, what am I not getting? What am I not achieving? Comparing himself to other people. Like, he hasn't actually tapped into how to use his masculine direction and open his heart at the same time in order to get that success in his career and his passion and his purpose. You know, he has a great connection to his wife, heart-wise and emotional, but he hasn't actually transferred that heart-wise to his passion and purpose and truly living that purpose, which is probably one of the reasons why him and Jerry are aligned, because they're both really trying to figure out how to live their true purpose in life and open their heart at the same time. So it's probably one of the reasons why the two of them end up together. Obviously, it's written that way, but you know, Jerry hasn't really figured out how to open up his heart and be loving and compassionate and things like that in his personal life, it's still more about friendship. Whereas Rod is just in his personal life, in his friendships, even his relationship with Jerry, his relationship with his wife, his child, it's all heart, it's all emotion, it's all love, it's all, he's just flowing with love and emotions. But when it's his job, he doesn't know how to do that. Whereas Jerry doesn't really know how to do that in any area of his life. So that's kind of, they're kind of learning from each other. It's actually a really great scene when Rod is talking to Jerry in the locker room, and he talks about getting the quan. And the quan, like he says, is like the embodiment of everything. Like, it's not just the coin about the money, it's about the quan. It's just it's the love, it's the everything. It's all embodied in one, which is really, it's really what we all want, right? And in reality, what we all want is we want to have the success, we want to have the love, we want to have everything. It's the masculine and the feminine together. It's having that success that drive the direction, and also having the heart, the openness, the love. It's having that all, and he calls it the quan. And you know, like Jerry says, you know, it's a great word. It's like, it's the embodiment of what we're all trying to thrive for. I don't love the word balance, but it's like having that masculine direction, but also having that open-hearted love and connection at the same time. And Rod actually finds that at one point when he is playing a game and things aren't going well, and he catches the touchdown pass and he goes down, and everybody thinks he's out. They think he's injured, they're worried about him, everyone's swarming the field. It's this big dramatic scene, and you end up realizing that, spoiler alert, that he is so in the moment. He is beyond the moment. He's totally out of his mind. He's now dropped into his body. He is fully embracing the moment for what it is, and he's managed to tune out everything around him. And he is like, he's lying there, and they're talking about like getting him off the field, and he's like, no, just let me enjoy it. You know what I mean? And he starts going around and he starts celebrating, and he just starts like, just truly being in the moment and enjoying it. And he lets go of all of that comparison that he has to other people, the bitterness, the anger, the everything, and he just fully embraces the moment for what it is. He had this goal. It was literally to to score a point, to score a goal. He had this mission. That was his mission in that moment. He succeeded, and actually now, after he had that direction, he had the passion and purpose, it's actually being able to be in the moment and fully feel how good it feels to have achieved that. And he really drops into his body to the point where he's tuned out everything else around him. And then he gets up and he starts dancing, and he's you know, with the crowd, he's getting this energy going, and it's like, it's that moment of realization of like, he's embracing his purpose. He's embracing his reason for being there. He even looks at the camera at one point and starts blowing kisses, which is for his wife, because again, he's so heart connected with her, and they have such a beautiful connection that it's like, he knows that this success is also her success, that they're a team, that they're together. You know, at the, you know, he's always thanking her for her contribution, for his family, and Jerry for his leadership. He's so open to not being about himself, his ego, what he hasn't gotten, I mean, that's kind of his ego death. I mean, it looks a little bit different than Jerry's ego death, but it becomes this moment of just fully dropping out of his head, he's not overthinking his job anymore. He's just letting his passion and purpose drive him. You could even make the argument that it's kind of a connection to a higher power so much. They don't make it into a religious thing, and it doesn't need to be a religious thing, but into some kind of a higher power. Like, he's actually kind of like almost left his body and is being guided by something that is greater than himself. And I think that that's really the moment that you see him really sort of step into his own, into his connection between his masculine drive and his feminine heart, and that's really where you get that melding together. So now we get to Dorothy. Dorothy is played by Renee Zellweger. She's a single mom. She's widowed, and she lives with her sister to help raise her little boy, who is just cute as a button. I'm not gonna get too much into Ray in this movie, but Ray definitely is a character that could open up anybody's heart, so he definitely contributes to opening Jerry's heart, because as a child he's so open, you know, and I think that helps inspire Jerry in this movie to really understand love. I mean, I think sometimes when you have a really closed heart, if you're around a child who is just so open and loving, I think it can really help open up your heart, because it reminds you of what your life was like before you got bitter and before you went through all your wounding and your trauma in the world. So sometimes being around a really open-hearted child can really be inspiring to all of us when we need to open our heart. So you find out a little bit about Dorothy and her marriage to her husband before he passed away, and you find out that he was, you know, popular and charming and not so nice to her is the way she puts it. And kind of makes you realize that Dorothy obviously has a bit of a wound for guys who are very charming, very likable, but maybe not so nice to her. And it's not that Jerry's not nice to her, but Jerry is very closed off to her. He probably would not have been nice to her had he not gone through his big ego death when he did. So at the beginning of the movie, Jerry Maguire probably would have actually been cruel to Dorothy, but you kind of get the impression that Dorothy she's just enamored with him because, again, he's handsome, he's charming, and that's obviously, like, you don't really know why she's wounded that way, but she obviously is attracted to that type of guy, the kind of guy who is obviously totally shut off from his heart. Dorothy's all heart. Like, she's all heart. She loves her son. She loves her sister. She's all heart, and she's obviously attracting guys who are not really heart open. And their actual first interaction is in the airport. Dorothy can't find Ray, her son, and she is freaking out because obviously her son is her #1 priority. Ray's just having fun. He's high-fiving people. He's just being sociable. But Dorothy's freaking out, and Jerry sees her in distress, which is very much a masculine drive to see a feminine in distress. Dorothy's a very feminine character. She's a mother. She has a lot of mother energy within her. She's also got a lot of wise woman. She has a lot of the feminine archetypes within her, and she's in distress, right? She's lost her son. She's freaking out. And Jerry sees her in distress, and his masculine drive to step in kicks in, and he decides to try to help her. And he realizes that she's lost her son, and he knows where her son is. He can see her son. So he basically, like, calms her down, and they get her son. And it's interesting because Dorothy goes into mother mode of, like, you know, needing to make sure her son is safe and protected. And Jerry and Dorothy have a conversation where Jerry kind of admits that he knows who Dorothy is, and Dorothy's kind of like shocked that he knows who she is, but she's feeling so seen. The feminine longs to be seen. So the fact that Jerry, who is, you know, this fancy executive, she's just an accountant that works for the company. So the fact that Jerry is actually acknowledging that he knows who Dorothy is makes her feel so fully seen, and that just only makes her even more attracted to him. Jerry is kind of a little bit disconnected. He's kind of like in his own world. He's going his own way, in his own direction. And then Dorothy compliments his memo, which is actually his mission statement. He corrects her because, again, it's his mission, and she starts complimenting him on it, and she saw parts of it that he didn't even see. Like, she was obviously fully seeing him and his purpose. Now, the feminine wants to be fully seen in her radiance and for her uniqueness, her unique qualities, her inner beauty as well as her outer beauty. The masculine wants to be seen fully for his true passion and purpose. So for the masculine to notice something unique about Dorothy, like he mentioned that he noticed that she had a picture of Albert Einstein on Shaquille O'Neal's body, like, he was noticing something unique and different about her. He wasn't just like telling her she had a nice ass or something like that. Like, he was noticing something that made her unique and different, so he was fully seeing her. Dorothy starts complimenting Jerry on his mission statement, and that's when Jerry starts to feel fully seen by her, because that's the feminine need to be seen for her uniqueness, for her inner beauty, for her radiance, whereas the masculine wants to be seen for his passion and purpose, for his truth. And Dorothy obviously sees more in what Jerry wrote than even Jerry sees, and he started to get a little bit uncomfortable with how deep she was going into everything, because he wasn't really sure how deep he was. Like, Dorothy sees Jerry, she even says it at one point when she's telling her sister, like, after they sleep together the first time, she's telling her sister how she's in love with him, and she's like, she says this, she's like, I'm in love with the man he wants to be, and I'm in love with the man he almost is. That's a key statement. The feminine rarely falls for a man the way he is. She almost always falls for his potential. If she's truly connected to her feminine energy and truly connected to her feminine intuition, she will fall for his true potential. That's different than a woman just seeing a man and being like, I'll just make him into what I think he wants to be. If she sees a man and she knows, like, okay, he's here, but, like, I can see in him that he could be here, she's gonna fall in love with this guy, and she's gonna constantly want to maybe push, maybe even nag. That's not the ideal way to do it, but she's gonna constantly want to inspire him to get to here. That's different than finding a guy who's here and just being like, well, I want a guy who's up here, so I'm gonna settle for this guy. and I'm just gonna try to make him into this guy. That's a different thing. Can look similar, and sometimes if a masculine is in his ego, he might think it's the same thing. But in reality, it's not the same thing. It's falling for a man's true potential. That can be really heartbreaking for the feminine if the masculine isn't ready to step into his true potential. It's free will. He always has a choice, and he also may waver. That's a big risk for the feminine, but that's why it's so important for her to actually tune into her intuition and also to observe his actions, observe his drive. And yes, the feminine can absolutely inspire a man to step into his greatness. It's just not a guarantee, so it's important to know if you're actually dealing with a man who actually wants to reach his true potential, or if he's just, you know, happy just, you know, being where he is. And it's also important for the feminine to know her own worth and to know when it is the right time to walk away from a partner if he is choosing to not step into his full potential. It's also a really great moment that I think signifies masculine and feminine, in that Jerry and Dorothy are on a date with Rod and Marcy goes into labor. And Dorothy actually goes up to Jerry afterwards. They're at home, they're in bed, and she's like, you know, like, what were you thinking watching them go through the full range of human emotions? Like, Dorothy's in this emotion. She's like, she's feeling so much stuff because she's witnessed, you know, this woman going into labor. She's witnessed this love and connection. She's witnessed all this stuff. She's feeling so many things, and she wants to know what Jerry's feeling. And Jerry's like, I was thinking, I hope he doesn't get injured. Like, Jerry's still in he's still in his masculine mind. He's still in his, like, I need to protect him and make sure that him and his family are okay. Like, he's in that moment. Dorothy actually admits, she's like, you know, sometimes I just don't know what you're thinking. And she's like, you know, I don't know your noises yet. And he's like, well, just ask me. And she's like, okay, well, I thought I just did. And they start to get deeper, and then of course Ray comes in and interrupts, and Dorothy wants a moment for them to talk, and Jerry's like, no, Ray, come in, because Jerry doesn't want to have the conversation, so he's using Ray as an excuse to not have the deep conversation, because Jerry is still not comfortable opening up in intimacy. Now, Jerry and Dorothy have this moment. Jerry actually kind of hypothetically proposes, but kind of proposes. They decide to get married, but it's all from his mind. It's from his logistical mind of like, okay, we'll save money. It's practical. Jerry's still thinking practical. He has not been able to really fully open up his heart and actually embrace intimacy with another person. But he does care about Dorothy, and he does want her in his life. He wants Ray in his life. Like, he wants these things, but he's not fully ready to open up and feel the intimacy yet. So they decide to get married. Jerry's obviously like not happy. He's kind of avoiding the connection. Dorothy is so heart open. She's so in love with him. He's just not giving her that love back, and she's definitely feeling like there's something missing. And actually, it's interesting how Rod calls Jerry out on this and basically is like, well, why did you get married? And Jerry's like, loyalty. She was loyal. And Rod's kind of like laughs hysterically, because it's just sort of like, oh, well, it's a reason. It's not sexy. Like, it's just, it's not because he actually was feeling love for her. It wasn't like he was feeling connected to her. It wasn't like he wanted to build a life with her. It was just, it was almost like he was rewarding her loyalty. The masculine definitely wants a loyal partner. But that's not enough to keep a relationship going. But Jerry has not been able to, he hasn't been ready to connect that way, because he's still closed in his heart. He's learning to operate from his heart in his business, but he's shut down in his heart in his personal life, which is kind of the opposite of what Rod is, which is he is all heart in his personal life, and his heart is shut down in his business. So that's why they're kind of there, and they're friends, and they're trying to balance each other out. So Dorothy realizes what's going on and realizes that Jerry is just totally disconnected, that he's starting to avoid her, and she basically decides that she's going to walk away, which for the feminine is one of the most difficult things to do. The feminine either opens or closes typically. So for the feminine to walk away from love and to walk away from the fullness of love, it takes a huge step for her. Like, it is not natural for the feminine to leave a relationship, and she even says it in this breakup scene. And I actually used to use, fun fact, I actually used to use this breakup scene. I had actually cut it together into a monologue, and I used to use this as an audition monologue back when I was acting, like many years ago. So I think I know this whole scene by heart. You know, she's like, it's not easy for me. She's putting all the blame on herself. She is, you're starting to see her feminine wounding right now. Like, she's now putting herself out there. She's putting all of her love into this partner who really isn't giving her that love back. That's her feminine wounding. That's her giving love and thinking that, she even says it like that, she thought she was in love enough for both of them. Like, it didn't matter that his heart was closed down, because she could love enough for both of them. That's that usually that's that feeling of like neediness, of needing to prove herself, of needing to be, if she can just be loving, if she can take care of him. She's really stepped into a lot of mother energy with him because, you know, like they keep saying, he doesn't want to be alone. She wants to be that person who's there for him. She's already in her mother energy taking care of Ray. It's kind of like she's stepped into that with Jerry. It's like she just wants to care for him and nurture him, but he's just so disconnected from that he's there and he's willing to be loyal because he's prioritizing loyalty. He's rewarding her for her loyalty, but he can't give her anything else. And he says at one point to her, like, what do you want, my soul or something? And she's like, well, yeah, I deserve that. She's now stepping into owning her worth. She wasn't really owning her worth before. She was marrying a guy who she kind of knew deep down inside wasn't fully committed to her, wasn't fully in love with her. She was doing all the loving. She wasn't receiving any love from him. So now she's now stepping back into this role of, okay, I know my worth, I own my worth. As difficult as this is, I'm gonna walk away from this. I'm gonna let this go. She's taking a lot of the blame on herself, which again, it's really both of them that got into the situation, but she's taking on the blame herself, but she's owning her worth. She's saying that she deserves his soul. She deserves all of him. She's willing to walk away, to, as she says it, to take a break. Gary's just like, you know, I don't quit. Like he wants to fix things. He's like, let's fix it. You know, he's like, I don't quit, this and that. Like he's still in his masculine mind. Dorothy is very grounded in her decision. She's like, you know, my need to make the best of things and your need to be responsible. You know, we could lose 10 years just being polite. Like that is very much the masculine and the feminine when they know it's over. Like the masculine is about responsibility. He's about loyalty. And the feminine is about like, well, let's just make the best of things. When that's the only thing that drives you in a relationship, that's usually not a really solid ground to be on. And those are the couples that like stay together for too long because they, you know, she's like, well, I don't want to give up on love. And he's like, well, no, I'm going to be loyal and I'm just going to stick it out. And that's usually when things fall apart. So then Jerry goes off with Rod and his big Monday night football night. And he has, as we talked about, his big moment of like actually finding his Quan and everything. And then Jerry being kind of in the middle between Rod and Marcy and their relationship and their connection. And it's actually like realizing that point. And Jerry has actually achieved his goal. He's achieved his mission. He has actually taken his job that he felt like was cold and heartless, and he actually managed to succeed. Like he's found success from an open-hearted place. He's managed to actually take that mission, take his mission statement, and actually bring it into his reality. Like he has actually achieved his mission. His phone rings and he's just like, Dorothy, and he realizes it's Marcy, and he gives the phone to Rod, and you know, Marcy and Rod have this moment. And I really do believe it's that moment that Jerry realizes that when he's achieved his purpose, like he's actually lived his mission, Dorothy is the one he wants to share that with because she's been a part of it. She has been his support system, and he's realized that that's what love is wanting to share that mission with someone else. That's when he goes to find her, and he finds Dorothy, and they have the iconic scene that is so legendary where Jerry steps in and basically is like, you know, where's my wife? Like, I want to talk to my wife. Like, he is now fully stepped in his masculine. He's got direction. He's like, I want to find my wife. And, you know, he sees Dorothy, and they have this moment where, you know, Jerry says, you know, like, our company, our little company, like, he's talking about it as theirs. Like, he realizes how much Dorothy has been a part of him living his mission. That's usually the moment when the masculine realizes that he is in love, is when he realizes that the feminine is in full support of him living his true mission, his true passion and purpose. The feminine will realize that she's in love when she feels like there would be an emptiness if she lost that love. Whereas the masculine will feel love when he realizes the feminine is in full support of his passion and purpose. And Jerry realizes that, and he's acknowledging that, and he's acknowledging the contribution that Dorothy has made to him living his full self, his true purpose. He says, like, I love you, you complete me. And I think a lot of people have twisted that you complete me line into it being a codependent thing, as if like they're not whole people on their own and now they're coming together. Like it's kind of been like a codependent catchphrase or something, when in reality what I think it actually symbolizes in this case is the masculine realizing that with the feminine he's better. Like he can live his true passion and purpose. She doesn't hold him back from that. She's not the distraction. She's not the competitor. She's not trying to keep him from his purpose. She's literally there in support of his true purpose, and they're living this purpose together, and he wants to share all of this with her. And that's the completion. It's not that they're not both solid people on their own. It's that they each have their own individual gifts that they bring together, and together they're stronger than they would be apart. And then of course there's the iconic line when he's trying to like convince her of this, and she's just like, shut up, like you had me at hello. Like, she's always loved him. She's always felt love for him. He just didn't know how to love. His heart wasn't open. He had no clue how to connect to that part of himself. It wasn't that he didn't love her, he just had no clue how to do that because he was so shut down and his heart was so shut down. Now, I'm not saying that women should necessarily emulate this movie and stick around and wait it out for a guy and see if he opens his heart. I feel like there's a lot of dating advice things that would tell women to do what Dorothy did and say, okay, I'm leaving, I'm gonna move, I'm gonna take another job somewhere, so that Jerry will then propose. And like, if you notice, he proposed out of panic. He proposed out of ego, out of a feeling of not wanting to be alone. He didn't propose out of love. So I think there's a big misconception that many people try to convince women that men will fall in love with a woman in her absence. It's the feminine that realizes she's in love if she feels like she's losing someone or losing something and she's not gonna have that fullness of love. The masculine doesn't necessarily operate like that. If you decide to play that game of like, ooh, I'm gonna run away or go somewhere else, like in hopes that the masculine will then realize that he misses you, you're not really gonna attract a masculine man. Now, I'm not saying that a woman shouldn't own her worth and be willing to walk away if a situation is not aligned for her. That is so, so important. That said, the masculine is going to realize that he's in love with the feminine when he realizes that she's in full support of his passion and purpose, which is a different thing than her just walking away. So I would never advise a woman to simply walk away in hopes that the masculine is then going to come after her, because even if he does, it might not be soul aligned. It might just be from ego. So it's so important for the feminine to make her decisions based on her own soul and to say, okay, if I am going to walk away, it's because I'm going to walk away because this isn't a relationship that's serving me. Not to walk away out of like a test or manipulation, because that's not necessarily going to get the outcome that you ideally want. And I could go into a whole discussion about that whole kind of thing and the concept of walking away from a relationship, knowing when to walk away, not. You can let me know if you want me to talk more about that. I don't want to dive into that too much because this video is probably already long, because I mean, I didn't even touch on a whole lot of stuff in this movie that I probably could touch on, because there's just so much good stuff in here, but I just really wanted to, do this breakdown because I really love this movie. I really do. And I saw it totally differently watching it from a masculine feminine perspective than I ever did watching it just regularly. So yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend watching it. After you watch this video, watch this movie, see if you can actually pick up on some of the things that I was talking about. I probably won't be able to put film clips in this video because YouTube doesn't like it, but I put film clip breakdowns of individual scenes from these movies on my TikTok, and I have been posting them on YouTube as shorts throughout the week. Be sure you check those out if you want to see individual scene breakdowns. I wasn't sure YouTube was gonna let me do that, but as long as YouTube is still letting me put these scene breakdowns here as shorts on my YouTube channel, I'll keep doing it. So hopefully that'll work out. If you can't see them here, you can check out my TikTok. The details will be in my description box below if you want to check that out. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on this movie or any movie requests or anything like that, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you and I love your suggestions. If you want to learn about the art of feminine communication, I have a new masterclass and the details will be in the description box below if you want to check that out, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching and I hope you join me next time.